Why hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Evidence-Based Excellence Interviews. Today, I sat down with Mr. Tim Davies, a man whose experience in the RAF and Royal Navy totals up to 20 years. He's seen many tours of active combat zones, and since his departure from the RAF, has transitioned over to the civilian sector, where as part of his Shadowlands online flying training school, he uses flight simulators to teach people what he used to do in the Royal Air Force and what he used to teach as he was a senior flying instructor. Tim's a very experienced and knowledgeable man, and we discuss the pervasiveness of woke ideology in the form of DEI, how and why it was able to infest such a prestigious institution as the British military, and the RAF in particular. We also discuss many other things that are plaguing the UK on a wider political level at the moment, such as the revelations involving the systematic rape, trafficking, and gang rape and torture of 250,000 plus predominantly young British girls by predominantly Pakistani Muslim grooming and rape gangs. And finally, interspersed throughout the interview, talk quite a lot about the things that we can do on a daily basis to make sure we live the best lives as possible, to make sure we're strong, principled, and healthy individuals. So ultimately, it's going to take all of us on an individual level, making sure that we are strong, healthy, and principled individuals via the actions that we take on a daily basis. That's going to be integral for taking our countries back. With that, enjoy. Hey there guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Evidence-Based Excellence podcast yet again with your host and friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, Mr. George Cresswell. And we're sitting down today with somebody I've been very excited to get on the show. We're going to talk about a lot of very interesting topics, especially regarding the UK and the wider political landscape, what's going on at the moment. His name is Dr. FJP, or the creator of Fast Jet Performance. His name is Mr. Tim Davies, runs a series of online training programs and online training flight school, but I'll let him explain a little bit more about that as he gives his intro in a moment. Mr. Davies, over to you.
Well, it's good to meet you, George. Yeah, lovely to be here, mate. No, seriously, I just teach people to do what I did in the Air Force. I just use a video game to do it, called Digital Combat Sim. And I run some small coaching clients, which I want to keep small. And I obviously have a YouTube channel called Fast Jet Performance as well, where we look into topics that are affecting us, especially in the UK at the moment.
Right, saying the overall experience from the RAF and the Royal Navy totaled up to about 20 plus years, correct in saying?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so 5 years in the Navy and 15 in the Air Force. That's right.
Very, very experienced. There's a lot of, no doubt, a lot of experience, a lot of skills, a lot of things we could talk about you picked up along the way. And more so pertinent to some of the things that we're going to be talking about today is, at least from what I've seen, and I don't want to be speaking out of turn in this regard because obviously I haven't been in the space specifically, but I think I mentioned in my initial message that what we're going to be talking about today, the sort of DEI woke infestation of various institutions in Britain especially, is not unique to that space. And I was watching a video with you, I believe you were talking about, it was only a couple of days ago, I think, a letter that you were reading for something on Twitter, and you actually mentioned that the RAF, if I'm not mistaken, had quotas of diversity and equity and inclusion, these kinds of things, which, at least to me, is quite alarming that our forces, or a branch of our forces, would be hiring on other things that aren't merit. And do we have reason to be worried in that regard?
Well, it's not actually that alarming when you think about what the military is. The military obviously serves the Crown, and the government obviously directs the Crown. The Crown has obviously abdicated that responsibility to the government to direct the military. So when you put these people in the senior elements of the military, which tend to be, and I don't want to say yes people, but you don't promote people who don't do what you want them to do. Okay, so if you are a boss of a squadron and you've got 3 squadron leaders underneath you, of which I was one of them, but I'm not doing what my boss wants me to do, I'm actively going against him, he's not going to promote me, because like promotes like. So what you get, you realize very quickly that yes men do well. So you become a bit of a yes man. I never did, of course, and a lot of the guys that I work with also didn't. Don't get me wrong, the majority of people in the military are not yes men. They're not at all. But the people that are, of course, do well, and they get to the top. And when they leave the military, you may hear them speak out against something. Okay, but they never do it when they're in, of course. Now they're safe with their pension. They can speak out because, you know what I mean? They, right on. I've got speaking out. Look how bad this is, mate. You never said anything when you're in, no. So, of course, it's not alarming because yes men promote yes men. Yes men get to the top, and the people that run the military are very much yes men. They will not challenge. They will do what the government tells them to do. So when diversity came in, and one of the weird things, George, is I was at a party. Well, I don't do parties. I was at a mate's birthday thing down in near Yeovilton, and he was an ex-army guy, and he knew a lot of army guys, and people at this soiree, as it were, just in a pub. One of them happened to be an army guy. I got chatting to him, and he said his last job was as a personal staff officer. I said, "Oh, who was that of?" And he said it was of Ben Wallace, who was the defence secretary, of course, at the time. And Ben was defence secretary at the time when this diversity thing hit the military in spades. And I said to this guy, I said, all right, I said, fair enough. You were there at this time. He goes, oh, yeah, I was there at the time. Yeah. I said, how on earth did diversity make it into the military? Because I'd said, I think on my podcast, that just wait till diversity, this DI thing hits the military. It will bounce off. The military will not accept it. And the reverse happened. I was wrong. Hands up to it. I always put my hands up to it when I'm wrong. I was so wrong. Even my wife was laughing at me. I'm like, I do not understand what's going on. What happened, of course, the military absorbed it in a way that maybe health and education, they absorbed it even more so. And why did they absorb it? Because they were yes men. So what happened, this personal staff officer said that Ben Wallace one day just said, oh, we're pushing diversity out. Make sure to service chief, let the service chiefs know, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, make sure they know that they really got to embrace this diversity thing now. We're really going to put this out. And that was it. He said the conversation wasn't a conversation. The directive was less than 2 minutes. He then obviously was like, all right, I'll make sure we direct all the service chiefs. And that was it. That was really all that was said. And then they absorbed it and they ran with it. And it did great damage. I still believe today, it did huge damage to the military by doing that. That's the problem with yes men.
Yeah, I think that's, and it puts me in the mind of when you talked about there, or when you highlighted the problem of yes men and people not willing to speak out at the time. Mm-hmm. Like, it's great when people speak out, but obviously It's pertinent to speak out at the time. It sort of puts me in the mind, and I'm not, as you said, there's a lot of good people in the military, and I fully stand by that. I have massive respect for anybody that served. I'll be the first to say that. But it sort of does put me in the mind of similar thought processes to maybe some of the Labour MPs, what's going on with the National Inquiry at the moment, where before, when Starmer said that do this or, you lose the whip, vote against it, or you lose the whip, that so many voted against it. But then even days afterwards, we're now seeing people start to turn, maybe because they feel safer, or maybe because they feel now in a position where they can speak out. And I don't want to draw a direct parallel there, because I don't think the two, cross perfectly, but it's just something that stuck out in my head there. And that theme of people not speaking out at the time, when these situations, when people were coming forward about their experiences being groomed by gangs and all of these things, with people not speaking out at the time, either through fear or whatever reason it was, it leads to so much damage later on down the line. I think we're really seeing so many cascading effects of these things that have been allowed to creep in over long periods of time.
Yeah, I mean, Peterson says something along the lines, doesn't he? I mean, we know all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And Peterson actually says, I think he was on the podcast, the CEO's podcast, whatever it's called, and he actually said something during the podcast there. He said, that is evil. That is how evil manifests itself, by good men not speaking out when they should speak out. Because to speak out means you have to suffer, George. And I know you do, because you're a personal trainer still, aren't you? Is that right?
Yes.
So you are obviously willing with your job to say, you know what, I'm going to speak my mind here, and I know some clients won't come to me because of it. Mm-hmm. My school's the same. My business is the same. My wife keeps saying you could have twice as many people in your business. You can make twice as much money you're making right now if you just took a neutral stance. And I said, but I don't want those people. I'll be honest with you. I don't want those people to come in and then to espouse their narratives within my school. I'd rather, I said, look, this is what it is. It's based on discipline. It's based on perseverance. And it's based on the embracing of suffering to actually get to something that we hold full of value. And the only way we can do that is by speaking our minds and saying, what we're seeing here is wrong. Andy Burnham, Sarah Champion, I think it was as well, didn't speak out.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. She has turned now, I believe. I think Andy Burnham's turned as well, the mayor of Manchester, of course. These are weak
Sarah
people,
Champion,
George.
I do apologise. She was one of the ones. I know she was getting a lot of flack because she initially was trying to speak out about it, and then she seemed to go quiet. I think it was back. Obviously, I'd be perfectly have the ignorance of youth on my side, which is why I love speaking to people and learning these things. Like I'm perfectly okay with giving my opinion, but like you said, hold your hands up when you're wrong and be willing to hear. Like you brought up Peterson, what he says, whereas think that the person you're speaking to knows something you don't, and go into conversations, go into dialogue. And I think that's one of the key principles that allows people. And that's what's been shut down a lot with the dialogue that we've had, like in schools and stuff like that. They echo chambers. The first say, then if you come in with some kind of dissenting opinion, they don't allow it. But I kind of lost my train of thought a little bit there for a minute, but Sarah Champion, it was in the Commons, I believe it was, or the Lords the other day, where she seemed to be almost scolding Rupert Lowe about what he said with regards to the National Inquiry, and then not even, a week later, she's changing her tune. So it's just like, it's almost like, why aren't people almost like saying to it and then sticking to it? What else is going on behind the scenes? And obviously we know so much with the infiltration of globalist non-governmental organizations, Larry Fink in BlackRock, Bill Gates, all of these people. Like, how deep does the rabbit hole go, so to speak, is what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I'm starting to change. She had an issue with the language Rupert Lowe was using, and for me, I'd rather he use that language. I mean, it's the same with Alex Jones. When Alex Jones went underground, remember that? A long time ago, he was sued, wasn't he, for Sandy Hook, went underground. And I remember thinking, no, don't put him underground. Don't do this to him. Let's listen to what he has to say. Now, a lot of what Alex Jones has said, by the way, has come true. So if you want to, whether you like him or not, it's come true. But don't stop people speaking. I'm a big fan. I'm anti-hate speech laws myself. I could not.
Me too.
I don't want any of them. And there is a danger, of course, with getting rid of them all. But I'd rather accept that danger than the alternative, because I think who makes up the hate speech laws? Who decides? It's probably going to be the worst people in the world. It's going to be the people at school you didn't want to speak to really because they were nasty people. Those people will get a little bit of control. It will go to the heads, and they are going to make up these rules. I see it in local clubs and communities. I belong to a rowing club. I was the chairman of the rowing club, and I had a committee, and we reduced the committee from 9 all the way down to about 5. It ended up being about 4. And those 4 people were senior people who had responsibilities in businesses, in civilian life. And we could sit around and we sort of would look at it from a very hierarchical perspective, like, right, what is best for the club? No egos. But when I had 9, there was personalities involved. There was this guy doesn't like that guy, and that guy said this guy. No, reduce that down. So the people, if I let those guys obviously make decisions and everything else, we'd have had a fragmented club. At some point, you've got to say, right, so what is the right thing here? And the right thing to do is to hear everyone, and then we can make a decision about it. But when you want to shut people down, I don't want to hear that person. And that's the issue with hate speech. We shut people down. Because if you listen to some of these things you see at Speaker's Corner, where you may get a Christian preacher, or you may get an imam or something, I want to hear what they're saying, because some of it is absolutely horrific and it has no place in society, but I still want to hear it. And I want to monitor that guy, and I want to know who his friends are and where is he preaching and what's going on. Imagine if we shut it down and we didn't hear that stuff. Because that's what hate speech does, of course. So, absolutely, it's not. I think the problem was she had an issue with what Rupert was saying, the language, and I think that she's inherently a good woman, Sarah Champion. And I believe that later in the day she went, no, you know what? It's a pretty simple thing, George. We've had inquiries, we've had the J report, we understand that it's not complete. It's how do we tie these things up? A lot of the older, I think there were girls that weren't even interviewed. I think there were some reports where no girls interviewed. So how do we? So what is it's an epidemic, isn't it? It's systemic. And I think we're going to turn over rocks, and the rocks we're going to turn over are going to reveal Labour councillors, and that's why they don't want to do it. It's understandable. I wouldn't want to do it as well if I was in the Labour Party. The last thing I'd want to do is go, let's have a full investigation. The right thing to do is to blow this open. Go, we never want this to happen again. And I can imagine Keir Starmer is an absolute tyrant, though. And I'm not just saying that lightly. Even his MPs will say the same thing. They don't speak out because they will be axed. They know that. And this was happening in the Labour Party. This happened when he got rid of the Corbynistas. They all saw that. They saw how ruthless he was. He had to be ruthless because he had to get rid of the anti-Semites, didn't he? If you remember that. He had to get rid of those people in the Labour Party that literally hated the state of Israel. It was a whole thing. He'd attracted them in, of course, with the support. He needed the votes. And now he's like, we're never going to get voted in if we carry on with this. We've got to get rid of them. So people could feel his ruthlessness early on. They know it. So his MPs are never going to question him. And I think that's going to be the undoing of the Labour Party. I think I could just see it falling apart. I think they're going to realise themselves that Starmer is an absolute dictator. And
I think it's going to almost the phrase I used. I think it was on a podcast I recorded literally from last night into the early hours of this morning, where I was talking about it, because I don't know if you've seen on X recently. I know you're quite active on there, but there's, with all the attention, and I'm fully aware that the attention is being driven towards Labour because obviously they're in power at the moment. They're the ones, the face of it at the moment, so to speak. But obviously we know that these problems go back through not just Labour administrations, they go back through Conservative administrations, and they go back so far. A lot of these problems, they go back to the 80s, 70s, potentially even 60s, some of them. But I lost my train of thought again. God damn it.
No, you're just talking about the podcast you did last night.
Yeah,
these events.
Yeah. And the problem you said with the Labour inquiry holding a mirror up to themselves, so to speak, is that the video that came out recently, I think it was from Labour25.com, there was somebody had compiled a video of 25 different Labour councillors, and some of them based in Rotherham, some of them based in other areas all up and down the country. There was a list of 52 that recently just came out, and what shocked me more, Nathan, is that these people are in primary schools, these people are serving on school board of school governors. These people are in so many different areas where they can be convicted on child sex crimes of some kind, whether it's actual acts towards a child or whether it's the making and distributing of pornographic material involving children and all of these things. But they child welfare officers, some of these people are involved in the child welfare system, and again, it just makes you wonder how deep this all goes, and just how deep and how much the cover-up has been. And it's exactly what you said. I think I agree with you when you say that the best thing to do is blow it all open. It has to be blown all open, and we have to hear things that we don't want to hear, regardless of how disgusting they are. I think that's what made reading some of the excerpts that are coming out from the courts or wherever at the moment regarding the rape gangs and stuff like that, some of the really evil things that have been done to these children. And I know you were talking about it on one of the videos I was watching literally just before we sat down now. And it's important to say it as it is and make sure that the language that's being used isn't necessarily the problem if it's conveying the message accurately. Like, the message may sting, the message may be something we don't want to hear because it's so sick and so disgusting, but we need to hear it, and we need to admit that we have a problem. I think it's one of the first things they say, if you want to get better at something, or if you want to get something around, whether it's an addiction or make positive changes in your life, you need to first admit that there's a problem. And sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you made some very, very good tangible points there. I mean, one of the things that interests me recently, actually, is why there's a couple of girls that have come back onto the scene that are having sex with lots of men. Have you seen this at all? Adult, actually, I think it's Bonnie Blue, and I think the other one's called Lily something.
Yeah, Lily Phillips,
That's it, Lily Phillips. So interesting. Why now have they come back up? Well, this is interesting, isn't it? So we were talking about Pakistani grooming gangs. Let's call it what it is. Pakistani rape gangs. They were raping, and of course it's interesting. I'm quite open with facts. I like facts. It's not necessarily rape to have sex with a girl between 13 and 16. It's not necessarily rape. There's an area of consent where it's actually called having sex with a child. Okay, so when people say it's rape, it's not rape. Under 13, tick, happy, it's rape. And some of these girls were down to 11 and stuff. I mean, to me, it blows my mind.
5 from what I've seen.
Hear that. I didn't hear that at all. Was that
from
right?
other documents that I've read, not necessarily just the Pakistani Muslims, like the list the list of 52 names of Labour councillors, ex-people and stuff like that. There was charges as young as 5 on
How are they getting hold of a 5? Where are they finding 5-year-olds from? I mean, it's not like a 5-year-old's not walking the street, is it? It's 5 years old. Where are they getting a 5-year-old from? I can understand when it's... Yeah, go on.
I think it's why it's so dangerous when I mentioned to you that they're lurking within the school system. I'll see if I can, while we're talking about here, I'll see if I can find an example for you.
But this is the thing about the Pakistani gangs. Of course, if we want to deflect from Pakistani gangs, a lot of people, and I see this on here, would go, hang on, what about the white gangs? Yeah, no, don't get me wrong. White gangs are actually quite difficult to find. They are them, but this was systemic. This is something that we need to talk about because it was Pakistani Muslim men that were doing these grooming gangs. It's just a fact, all right? We know it's a fact. We need to tie it together. That's what an inquiry is for. Now, if you want to deflect from that and you want to go, because you want to look at maybe these young girls were degenerate. Maybe, like the police said, they were complicit. Like a 13-year-old can be complicit in this. It's disgusting me, but let's pretend they can. Let's pretend a 13-year-old who's been put into a home somewhere, no one loves her. And that was the interesting thing about it as well. A lot of these girls went back to these people. I heard someone talking about this because that was the only place they could find attention from someone. Like, they didn't have a family. This is so disgraceful. I think this is one of the worst things about it that we're not addressing. Like, these young girls were so unloved by anyone, but by anyone in the world, that they would go back to their rapists because that was someone that paid them attention. I mean, in the UK, we have this happening. That's not being covered. We're just talking about, oh yeah, young girls being raped. Stop. Why? They were going back to their rapists. They were going back there to be raped again because that person was giving them drugs, giving them alcohol. They were paying them attention because none of the British people were paying them attention. We allowed a Pakistani Muslim man in his 50s to pay them attention instead. What kind of society are we? How degenerate a society are we where we can't even look after our own girls? We're not speaking about that, but let's move on a little bit. So if we want to sort of pretend it's not the fault of foreigners, so we're talking foreigners, which are Pakistani Muslim men, many of who shouldn't even be in this country in the first place. If we want to say it's not their fault, how can we do that? Well, let's bring in white women that are profiteering off their body in porn. Let's bring in that Lily woman, and let's bring in Lily Phillips. Let's bring in Bonnie Blue. Look at these girls. It's just Twitter, right? It's just happened now, isn't it? I think one of them slept with like 1,000 men. It's all over Twitter. So now we can say maybe the girls were the problem. Maybe it wasn't these men. Because if you speak to, Pakistan, I had spoke to Pakistani men. He said, well, these girls were available in a way that Muslim women aren't. I'm like, mate, that you can't justify that here. Not in the UK, you can't. Are you walking on some thin ice there, mate? Even with me, and I'm not a violent man now, and I'm in my 50s. But you know what I mean? You say that to the wrong person in the UK, and you're going to find yourself on your back because they're going to hurt you in a big way. So I think that's why why that's coming back up again, George, is that we just want to pretend that these Pakistani men shouldn't have been hanged at some gallows somewhere.
I can only imagine being in the situation of some of the fathers that have given their testimonies where they tried to go and save their daughters from these, rape dens after they realized what was going on. And they were actually criminalized, arrested by police and taken away, and they wouldn't actually do anything. I could just, it fills me with it fills anybody really with a murderous rage that could be your daughter or your sister or something like that. I've got, young nieces and nephews. I'm an only child, but I've got young nieces, nephews, young cousins. Well, not nieces and nephews. I affectionately call them my nieces and nephews, but young cousins. I'm just imagining that could be done to them. And going back to one thing, though, I was going to read off one of the names from this list, which I was going to highlight the point that I made before. It's number 29 on this list, and I'll flash it up on the screen, and I can send this over to you if you haven't seen it. Is somebody by the name of Sam Chowdhury. It says, Labour Lord Mayor sent to prison for multiple rape of children as young as 5 years old. So just...
I just find that incredible. I mean, I think we're fortunate. I say I'm fortunate, and I'm assuming you are as well, that I don't have that problem, that I look at kids in that way. But do we have to live in a society where we allow other people that do live? I mean, these people are a threat. Why are they here? Like, they shouldn't be here. I was listening to a guy the other day who was on Border Force for a long time. He was talking about the problems with the European Convention of Human Rights. And I think Article 3 within that says that we can't deport people who may be tortured or punished, and Article 8 in that was saying that they have a right to a family life. So even this man you just mentioned who abused a 5-year-old girl, under the ECHR, he still has a right to family life. Therefore, we can't deport him, especially if he's going to be tortured. I think Pakistan at one point said, send them to us, send them back to us, we'll look after them. And then I think Labour said we can't do that or something.
It says a lot. When wasn't it? I think it was recently the UAE described the UAE, so the United Arab Emirates, described that there were like 8 organisations within the UK that even they would designate as terrorist organisations. I think due to their affiliations with the Muslim Brotherhood or whatever.
Incredible.
I like what Gad Saad says about it, where you've just got this suicidal empathy, where there's just so much empathy that you have empathy for these people that would do your society and your family and the people that are related to you, the people you hold dear, irreparable damage. And it's just, I think where does tolerance have its limit, I suppose? Where does tolerance have its limit?
So when wars happen, it goes out the window for a start. Once someone attacks your country and people start dying, all that shit goes. DI goes. People don't paint fucking rainbow flags. Now, in my family, I've got a couple of sisters, and one of my sisters obviously works for the NHS. Why would she not? And she is very much into this suicide empathy. And I remember saying to her, because she believes in open borders, freedom of movement, which is a very nice thing, especially, you know, if you're coming for a country that maybe doesn't have the provisions that you require, and you come to another country that does, like ours. So that works really well that way around. But I don't see anyone moving to Tunisia or Algeria anytime soon. You know what I mean? I don't see people going, you know what, I'm going to go and live in northern Nigeria. Let's go and do that. No one's doing that, right? It doesn't work that way around. So I said to my sister, I said, do you lock your doors at night at your house? She's like, yeah, of course I do. I said, why'd you do that? She goes, I don't want people stealing my stuff. And I said, but it's the same. That's what a border is. A border is. And then she would complain as well that her children can't get on the housing ladder. And I'll say, well, that's because there's housing. Obviously, there's more people. There's less housing. And she just refuses to believe it. She says it's not that. And she should say, well, look, all my team in the hospital, Tim, all immigrants. I'm like, yeah. And I want those people in here. I don't want the people that are filling with 5-year-old girls. I don't want them. You know, that's the thing.
I agree with you, and I'd be the first to back anyone in that regard, because some of the people that took care of me when I was at my most vulnerable, so in July 2033, well done, George. When in July 2023, I was admitted into ICU and I very nearly lost my life. I spent a week on ICU and I was in a medical-induced coma for a lot of it. But during my recovery on ICU, pretty much all of the staff members that were assigned to me were of immigrant background, and they were absolutely tremendous with me. You know, very empathetic, took care of me. They were very responsive, lovely people. And I was not the easiest to deal with when I was in ICU, absolutely cracked out of my head on morphine and God knows whatever else. But those people, they are a tremendous asset. I'd be the first to say that. But it's almost like a lot of people, you know, a lot of bad actors, whether they're doing it intentionally or not, or knowingly or not, will almost use that as a smokescreen, do you think, to cover for all these other people, whether they realize they're doing it or not?
Yeah. Because the conversation's a difficult one, isn't it? And I think a lot of people are very virtuous and they don't want to be called racist. It's so bad for them to be called racist. I put racist in my bio, I think, for Twitter now. I put far right supremacist or something. Just get it out there, right? I'm not.
But if you want myself the friendly neighborhood far right thug, to be fair.
Well, I mean, it's so ludicrous, isn't it? What's far right now? It's what we used to be. It was centrist. I mean, so people don't want to be called racist. But the truth is, we are all inherently slightly racist. We are slightly. I had a guy from the Air Force say, slightly racist old man. I'm like, yeah, we pretty much all are. And one day he'll realize that as well. It's called in-group preference, isn't it? And there's out-group preference. So we prefer people that look like us. Now, if you get a little black kid that grows up in a white family, that black kid will have problems understanding the mannerisms of black people because he's grown up in a white family. Vice versa. You grow up a white kid in a black family, that white kid has problems with white people because the mannerisms are slightly different within the races. We're not having a conversation about that. We're not having a conversation about disparate IQ levels through, say, you know, different races or different. And people say it's not race, Tim. It's not a race-based thing. Well, let's have the conversation then. If it's not that, if diversity is such our strength, and you truly believe that, let's have a conversation about it. I mean, honestly, why are we not talking about it? Because if diversity was our strength, you'd be shouting about it. The government would be shouting about this, and it will be proving why it is. Look at all these Pakistanis that come in. Look at their intellect level. Look at the business they start. Look at the tax they pay. It's saying none of that, is it? None of it at all. So I think it's not true. Because if it was true, they'd be celebrating it to get more people in. But we know it's a smokescreen to try and foolishly push up gross domestic product at the expense of GDP per capita, of course, which no one seems to bloody understand. So we think bring more people in, increase spending as well, because spending is part of GDP. So the more we spend as a government, the better the GDP looks. I mean, the debt to GDP right now in the country is about 100%. I know other countries have it more, but we cannot reduce that debt. So the only way we can reduce that ratio is by increasing the GDP. And how do we do that? We bring more people in that we hopefully can tax more. The truth is we can't, and we increase spending, and we're on a road downhill.
I was going to say, just seems like a positive feedback loop of destruction.
Yeah, but I kind of like it in a way because I'm English, right? It's a bit of a battle. This is why I don't understand people leaving the country. I'm like, fuck, this might be your journey. This might be what you need to do. Like, this could be the best time to live in the history of humanity. Like, right now, England...
It's an interesting outlook. I like it.
the birthplace of civilization, right? This is it. This is where everyone's speaking English. Whenever people argue on Twitter, I'm saying, what language are you using, mate? When you criticize England and you start telling us how we were all slave masters and everything, even though we stopped it in the 1800s, what language are you speaking? Oh, speaking English. Exactly. Look, come on. Like at one point back in the 1920s, like 25% of the world's population spoke English. I mean, it's the most incredible thing. I think England or Britain was in control of 25% of the world's population. This is why people want to come here, because we're a fair, tolerant nation, and we are, most definitely, and that's being abused. And I think it was changing us. And I think right now how we do this is very difficult, because the laws we've got in, it's almost like we've got to change the constitution that we kind of have, really. We've got to look deep into what do we really want, because we genuinely cannot get rid of these people or stop these people coming in with the laws as they are in the land. And also, by the way, the conversation we've got to have is, if we do stop these people coming in, are we prepared for the economy that we're going to be facing, because it's going to be a very difficult one.
I think it's a bit like what and I have limited understanding in this regard, but what Ronald Reagan done, which was a great example of some of the things which people looked at what he did, was one of the things when he a bunch of unions, I think, went on strike fairly early on in his presidency, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, Ronald Reagan died not long after I was born, so I wasn't alive for this, but it's just from my limited understanding. And he was saying, they were demanding this, they were demanding that. I don't know the specifics, but he was steadfast in his argument and steadfast in his words of saying, this strike is illegal, or whatever word he used. Everybody needs to return to work. If you don't, you'll all be sacked.
That's right.
And I think it was a great example of somebody following through on their word, primarily, knowing that it was going to cause a huge, downswing. It was going to cause a huge headache in the short term, but in the long term, it was going to pay off dividends. And I think that's what so many, and that can be applied to so many facets of life. I talk about a lot of it with regards to people in the health and fitness and stuff like that. I'd be like, you're making short-term sacrifices now in a lot of ways, and we can try and make those as little short-term sacrifices as possible to make it sustainable for you. But you have to make some short-term sacrifices, whether it's in the gym, whether it's in your diet, whether it's in your daily activity, whether it's putting your phone down for a bit, and whatever bad habits you may have, so that you have these long-term benefits. So a lot of people, can't tear themselves away from those kind of things. And I think it's like, as you said, when the people climbing up the ranks, or people at the top of the RAF, and these people, they're yes men, and they don't want to rock the boat and all these things, that it creates so many problems later on down the line. I think that's what we're in the midst of dealing with now. And I think because it's gotten so far, it's exactly what you said, in order to get out of it. And that was actually one of my questions, which I had in one of the sections here, which was, how, in your view, do we start to turn the boat around, or whatever, if there is a way to turn it round?
I'm not clever enough to answer that, and I don't pretend to be. I'm very careful with what I say, because I realize how ignorant I am. I'm only a product of what I've read. I'm only a product of what I've seen, and how we think, and the conversations we have with people like yourself, George, and other people we converse. But I've been there for 50 years, and of those 50 years, probably 30 of them have been where I've seen a bit of society. And I would argue, actually, for 20 of them in the military, you don't see too much anyway, because I'm the wrong person to ask. I haven't got a solution. And if I had one, I'd be shouting about it. But the truth is, I don't think anyone does. I think the key, the only thing I would say is this is why listening to you is so good, because you've nailed it. There needs to be a great deal of suffering in order for us to come out the other side. But people don't want to suffer. People are into that short-term gain. I mean, if you argue with me, right, I'm about 10 years away from, maybe 15 years away from retirement or whatever. I'm working a business now. I want to maximize my growth. Like, I really want to maximize that to put into my pension, so when I retire at 65, I can go and buy my Porsche and I'm all right. You know what I mean? I realize that that's not what my life's going to be. My wife and I argue about this all the time. We're probably not going to be now making enough money to probably retire happily, because we're going to have to sacrifice a lot of that, whether increase taxes on people who would be in the top 40% of earners, which is probably me in the top 40%. If you earn over about 65 grand, you're probably in that top 40% of earners. I think top 40% of earners pay 76% of the tax. The top 1% of earners pay 40% of the tax. So I'm paying, my cohort is paying, your cohort paying a lot of tax. Understand that. All I'm arguing is, I want to know that tax is going to solve something. I don't mind paying it, but I want to know it's not going to be thrown at immigrants that aren't going to bring anything back. I mean, genuinely, immigrants who've been proven, we know this for a fact, as a net deficit on the country. The majority of immigrants at the moment are a net deficit. I'm not talking about the people that are working in the health service, education, defence, that are bringing in a tangible reward, and we can see that. I'm talking about the ones that are bringing their families, maybe on an education visa. Families sit there. dependents. I'm talking about these people here. We need to say, right, you've done your 3 years education, you're out. And we need to take, like, we're not listening to a no. Yes, the country you've come from is quite violent. And yes, you may be facing repercussions for leaving. And that could have been a decision you thought about at the time. But you didn't want to. You didn't want to do that. Well, I'm sorry, it's still going back. And people will die. And we will get accused of nasty things. And it's going to be horrendous. And England's going to get, or use England, because when we talk about the term British, it's very inclusive of a lot of people who I don't think you can call English. I don't think you could call them as an Anglo-Saxon heritage. And I feel that we need to be talking about this ancestry that people don't talk about. Like, I will wrap myself in a flag. And you bury me in that flag and I'm happy. My wife's happy, everyone's happy, right? And that's the flag of England, so St George's flag. Wrap me in that flag. Now, I'm half Welsh. Wrap me in a Welsh flag as well if you want to. But it's important that we have an ancestry. So I know that my actions have a tangible result on the people that are in this country. So when I run a club or society, I know that I'm helping those people I am. If I'm British, so I've come from Nigeria, say, like Kemi Badenoch had. Her mother came over here. She was an anchor baby, had the baby, took her back again. So just listen to what that was about, because that happens a lot. Kemi Badenoch's mother came to the UK to have the baby. Then she took the baby back to Nigeria, and they went to Nigeria. Yoruba tribe. Kemi Badenoch identifies as a Yoruba. That's what she said. All right. So she identifies English. Yoruba. So she obviously had her education in Nigeria. Then she obviously went to America, had education in America. And then she came back here. Now she's running a Conservative Party. You tell me how much that woman actually values, because she's not an Anglo-Saxon. She has no heritage whatsoever. She has a Nigerian heritage. She identifies as a Nigerian. And she's running the Conservative Party. Now, people will call me racist for that. It's like, I'm not preventing Kemi Badenoch doing anything at all, which is the definition of racism, because of her race. I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is, I believe that if we want to be invested, if we want to elect someone who we know is invested in the welfare of the people of Great Britain, then they need to have an ancestry that is British, like a true British ancestry. And
they need to have roots in the land.
But how far do we go back? And that's a valid thing. That is valid concern. I said the same thing about Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak was born in Southampton. I was born in Portsmouth. We're very similar ages. Where's he now? He's in California. Look, all I'm saying is we need to have that conversation. Like, I mean, I think the AfD in Germany are doing this at the moment, where they're talking about this. And I think they're trying to ban the AfD. Have the conversation. That's what I'm talking about. But it's going to be difficult. And the problem is, George, this is where we work out whether people of this country are strong or weak, because the people you talked about originally were weak men. And the people I talk about in the military here, weak men. Allowing diversity into the military, where that is a pure meritocracy based on a hierarchical structure, when you change that even a little bit, it crumbles. Weak men did that. And I basically lost work out of this. I lost jobs. I've spoken about it before, lost a substantial amount of money by saying, do not put people who are diversity hires in this airplane, and therefore said to me, oh, we weed them out in training. No, you won't, because eventually they will be the people giving the training, and they will not weed them out because they're going to be sub-performance themselves. They're going to be ignorant themselves. They're not going to be the best of the best at all. And they're going to be training other people and going, well, he's all right. And I see it now. It's a lowering of the standards. I'm a standards guy. That's what it was. Those standards are being lowered. And when the standards are lowered, I'll tell you what happens. Those standards become normalized. Look at the police. Look at healthcare. Look at education. Look at government now. Crikey, look at government. It's
in education with affirmative action programs and all stuff like that.
Awful. And what do we do? We sit here and it becomes normalized. I understand that. The reason I go to the gym every morning in my garage, George, is not because I want to, by the way. It's because I have to. Because I don't want to normalize my existence into being an unhealthy bloke. I don't want to be out there. The other morning I went out, there's -3 degrees. You know, when you're lifting weights, it's -3. You're like, this pisses me off. My fucking hands. You know, I don't use gloves. I'm like, this pisses me off. I'll do press ups instead because my fucking hands hurt. I don't want to be there, but I am there because I know one day someone's going to call on me and I might need the extra 15 seconds of just cardio. I might just 15 seconds to drag my wife out of the way of a moving vehicle.
A bit of extra strength or something like that.
Anything. It might not be enough and I might die. I accept that, but I want people to turn around and go, well, at least he tried to be the best he could. You know, at least he tried to eat a healthy diet, even though he wanted to, you know, all that stuff.
It reminds me of the outlook, and again, just how it was seeing, in my opinion, just how devastating the DEI programs and all of these things are with the California fires that have recently been going on at the moment, where I think it was the either chief superintendent or whatever rank it was, or whatever rank they were, whatever they are, and they were saying that if I'm not strong enough or whatever, you know, it doesn't matter about my merit or anything like that. If they're in a position, you know, it's their fault. I can't remember the exact quote.
You shouldn't have been there. Shouldn't have been. Your husband should not be in the building. Yeah.
want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or, you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire. Which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
Classic example of, you know, the DEI hire of this person that, oh yeah, if that person's in a position where they're getting burned to death and I can't get to them, it's their fault.
It's their fault, yeah.
And
She actually said that, yeah. She said that. Yeah. Now, it may have been comedic. It may have been her attempt at some light humour. She was a big woman herself, of course. Let's not argue with that, you know. And I think also one of them is being paid like $700,000 a year. I mean, you have to remember, when we talk about red lines, Reagan was quite an interesting one. I'm glad you brought him up, because when you read some of what he's said, his speeches and stuff, I miss those times. I'm not saying they were perfect, but, you know, the 80s, the 90s, I think the 90s were probably, well, if I think about the 90s were probably the best. But either way, I'm just saying I was born mid-70s. I don't remember much about the 70s or 80s, but the 90s I do remember.
Wish I'd have known.
Well, you know, I joined the Navy back in '93, and it was very pure. I didn't have a phone. You know, I drove a Mini from Dartmouth back to Guildford, where my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, was. You know, I've been the same woman since I was 19 years old. I think I'm quite fortunate in that regard to be with the same woman since I was 19. But when Reagan said that, you know, I'm going to sack all the air traffickers for going on strike. And then when you look at like Obama with the red lines in Syria, if you do this is a red line. That happened. Assad did this, and I think it was the gas with the barrel bombs. And Obama didn't do anything. And now, from now on, we can disregard anything Obama said, you know, because he's not going to do it. So I think sometimes you've got to say, right, I'm going to make this threat. I'm going to make this threat. I remember I was in a job and they said to me, unless you take your YouTube channel down, we're going to have to let you go. Fuck off. What the fuck already? They don't realize who I am. Like, I'm going to double down on my YouTube channel now. I will sack this job off and I'll go back to working. I'll push trolleys back in Asda again, because that's where I started off from. All right. And that's an honest job. I know that because I did it for like 3 years when I was at university and afterwards. You just collect trolleys, you bring them back again. I'm not going to take down a YouTube channel because that is against, I'll be honest with you. I think speech is more important. And it's probably a very naive thing. We die poor, but we still die wrapped in a flag as honourable men. And I don't think we have honourable men anymore. Point out an honourable man to me. I'm struggling. I'd say Rupert Lowe would probably be one. I think Farage is struggling. I think, was it Zia? I think he's a good guy. I think Ben, I like what Ben says. You know, Ben Habib. But I think, you know, there aren't really many people I look at anymore. And they should inspire us to do better things.
Yes.
And I don't see politicians. I don't see military leaders. I see the odd one or two military leaders. I see some Americans as well that I'm very interested in, and some guys in some other militaries as well. But there's rare, and I used to, when I was growing up in the military, we had characters in command. And everyone knew, oh, that guy, no, he's amazing. I remember I'm sorry, I'll just spin this. I remember I was in a wardroom down in Devonport, and a man walked in, and we're all young fighter pilots in the Navy, you know, in training, but we all got the flight suits on and we're all drinking. And it was a naval base. It was Plymouth, so it was submarines, and I think it was mainly surface vessels. But this guy came in, everyone was quiet, and I was like, you're all drinking. I was like, who's that guy? They were like, that guy is he's like the most senior submarine captain in the Navy. It was like Goddard walked in. Everyone was so like, that's the kind of guy. We don't have these people anymore. They just don't exist in society. And I don't know why. I just think people aren't speaking out. People are too afraid. They're too worried about what the pushback's going to be. But allow it to happen. That's how we learn, isn't it? We say something and someone criticizes us and we go, think about that. Happened to be last night. Someone talked about my drinking on YouTube. I wrote a comment on it. And I was like, he said, we don't need to hear about your drinking, Tim, because some of us can drink and not fail at life. And I just went, no, but, you know, fair enough. I got triggered by it. I was like, I'll think about that. I'll think about that comment. That's how we learn things, isn't it? And I'm like, hang on, I flew fast jets all the time for 20 years whilst fucking drunk out of my head, like everyone else did, by the way, because that's the Air Force we're in. That takes a certain amount of skill to balance that. And I could talk about drugs and everything else and alcohol and how hard it is to be addicted to drugs and still do a job like that if people are interested. But or alcohol, not drugs, you know what I mean? But I'm talking about the same thing. But no, absolutely. You know, we have to have these conversations. And I don't think people want to have these conversations anymore. They're just happy to try and live a perfect existence. And so people can think they're great. I'm not. I'm fundamentally flawed. I put my hand up, the first guy to, I'm fundamentally flawed. I'm trying to do better. And that's all I'm asking of people is just try and do better. You're an Englishman, right? Or you're a Welshman or a Scotsman or you're an Irishman. Let's try and do better. Like, if you do better, your family does better, your community does better. Why? Because they look up to you and they want to be part of what you're driving, and they're proud for you to be part of the circle, even if you are wrong. Sometimes you say wrong. It just doesn't happen. And I think unless we get back to that foundational element of what it means to be a good citizen, there we go, we've said it. A good citizen, which means we don't touch up 5-year-old kids. And if we find people that do, by the way, we do something about it. We don't tolerate that within our communities. You know what I mean?
Yes,
so
absolutely.
We shouldn't. And I think it gets to the point where it's like, right, have we found a bunch of people that are touching 5-year-olds? Yes. Where are the men at? Oh, the men are here. Are we tooled up? Let's go and smash the place down. But I'm not advocating that, George, because we can never advocate incitement to violence. I'm not saying we do that. And it's very important we don't do that, of course, because that is against the law, and we all understand that. But we're getting to the point where the law doesn't do anything. The law cannot do anything. It's not big enough, it's not powerful enough, or the judiciary won't support it. Yes. What happens then? Two things happen then. The first, we allow it to happen then. The second is that we don't allow it to happen. And that's what we got to look at. The first one is we allow the police and the judiciary and everything else to not deport these people and for them to roam the streets, potentially touching up 5-year-old kids again, or raping schoolgirls, blah, blah. The second one is we all do something about it, but we all go to jail. And it's going to come down to that, unfortunately. I think at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to the, unless we, and that, of course, is a foundational, that's when we literally go into, riots and everything else, which no one can condone. That's why people were locked up for those Facebook posts, weren't they? Because that were advocating. And of course, we can't do that. But you can see how society would break down along those lines if we lose the ability to obviously, make a society as it should be.
It's just the classic example, and you look at any example throughout history of, the USSR, Cambodia, where the government decided to turn on its people, and that's ultimately what we're seeing, and it just makes you think, where is this heading, and obviously, as you said, what can we do about it? And I think the biggest thing that we can do on a personal level. And another Peterson chapter in his book where he says, put your house in order before you criticize the world, or put your house in order before you go fixing the world, these kinds of things, clean your room, those kinds of things.
Yes.
Is that people being willing to stand on principle, like you said you were willing to do when whoever it was that said to you, you need to take your channel down or you're going to lose this job, these kinds of things. And it reminds me of a personal example for me, where I decided to leave one of the jobs that I was in, one of the roles where I was in, where I'd been there for nearly 10 years. But in all of my nearly 10 years there, it was the first time within this, time that I was there that they were showing that they were going to start bringing in these diversity and equity trainings into our regular training sessions that we done every single month. They were trying to get us, so they made the people that stayed there, I didn't do mine in the end because I left, they had to write pledges, literal pledges, and that's the word they use, on how they were going to contribute to net zero and these kinds of things in the workplace.
What? Really?
We are just rec assistants and lifeguards, and these are the things being had to do. In all of I was there for, I left towards the tail end of last year, so 8.5 years I was there. This is the first time in 8.5 years that I'd ever seen it, and I'm there thinking, at the very least, nobody else can see it, but I can see the writing on the wall. I'm like, I know where this is going. I know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. And the fact that they called it a pledge, they said, make sure you do your pledges, your carbon pledges or your net zero pledges. I'm like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this.
This is a job, though, isn't it? It's like, what happens in the days when you turn up at 9 o'clock and you work for the job they want you to work? Tim, I want you to come here, pick up trolleys in Asda car park. I'll do that. I'll put the Asda thing on, I'll go and get them. And at 5 o'clock, I want you to go home, 9 to 5. That's a job. When we start saying, and you need to pledge to manifest a greener lifestyle and what you're doing, that's not a job anymore. It's
the first time I'd ever seen politics being forced onto people within my workplace, and I was like, I'm not about this.
Well, in RAF Bryce Norton, Claire O'Grady was the station commander at the time, and I know her husband and Claire quite well, but she managed to get, I think, the only rainbow crossing drawn on any base in the whole of Europe. She got one drawn on the, and I remember when I challenged her on this. It was outside the nursery, and I think they said, "Oh, it's to do with the kids. It's rainbow, isn't it?" And then I literally got Bryce Norton's front of their webpage up, and it said about diversity. We've even drawn a rainbow DI crossing in front of. I'm like, these are children. They're kids. You're trying to enforce this degenerate thing onto children. And I will say it's degenerate. Just go and watch a Pride March. Tell me it's not degenerate. Watch a Pride March. Take young children to a Pride March. And if you're a Christian man, if you're a conservative man, you'll be like this in front of their eyes. You're like, don't look at this. Because you've got people walking down there in hardly any clothes on at all, you know? Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's degenerate.
I was going to try and find it for when I'm editing another episode of the podcast where I was talking about, it was an image which circulated around X a little while ago. Again, you're never going to see any of this through like mainstream media or legacy media channels or anything like that. You're never going to see that. I think that's one of the biggest things as well. The legacy media apparatus I think it's slowly collapsing, but it's been so strong for so long that's what's contributed to a lot of the social indoctrination that we have. But there were people holding pro-pedophilia signs at pride flags all the way back when they were at Pride marches all the way back as far as they were, and admittedly they may have been a fringe, don't get me wrong, but we've already, and people were saying, slippery slope and all of these things, but this is hard to deny the normalization of those certain things now, or at least the attempted normalization of certain things. And people like, is it Harriet Harman? I believe her name is one of the ex-Labour councillors that was affiliated with a pro-paedophilia organisation.
It's PI, wasn't it? Yeah, the paedophile information exchange, wasn't it? Yeah,
it's just like.
But we've got to be careful of that as well, because I can understand it in a way. Because if you ask me about paedophiles and paedophilia, I would say these people aren't. Okay, we've got to be careful here a little bit, but I'm quite open about it. If you've got someone whose sexual development stops at the age of 7, so no matter what age they get to my age at 50, they still like 7-year-olds, and that won't ever change. It's not curable. They can do something about it insofar as they can't act on it, but it's not curable. And they will lie, of course, to try and get access to pictures of 7-year-olds because they're attracted to 7-year-olds. You could put a beautiful woman in front of them. You could put Monica Bellucci, anyone like that. They don't care. They want that person to be 7 because their sexual development stopped at 7. So we've got to be mature about it. How do we accommodate these people in our society? People will say, well, just kill them all. Yeah, I get that, and we understand that, but they might have families themselves, even though they're attracted to 7-year-olds. The truth is, we need to do something about it. We need to understand that. And I think Harriet Harman was trying to understand this in the same way. So that's why, and people might hit me on that, because they got more information. I'm happy to listen. But from what I've read, she was trying to understand more about the development of paedophiles and how to keep them within society. Doctors now, I think some doctors, there's a program where with AI, I think some paedophiles are allowed to go to the doctor and they're allowed to create, I think 10, because it's illegal for you to draw a picture of paedophilia. It's illegal for you to do that, I think. You can't draw a picture of, you're not allowed to do that. You're creating images, you're creating indecent images, and you're not allowed. Now, some doctors, I think there's a program where paedophiles can go into the doctors, and under supervision, they're allowed to either create or draw, I think, like 10 pictures a month or something of paedophile acts. And it's a way of controlling their urges. All right. Whether we think it's right or wrong, I couldn't care less. It's happening. It's done. Okay, it's fine. So I'm very careful when I'm critical of this, that I must have, that my information isn't complete, George. You know what I mean? So we can all say Harriet Harman is evil. She supports paedophiles. Well, let's just open up that box. Let's unravel it. Is it the truth? Like Sarah Champion against the National Inquiry. Is she, or did she really have a specific issue with what Rupert was saying? I think it's a bit of both, to be fair. But, let's be fair to people, because if we're not the fair ones, then we're as bad as my sister saying she wants open borders, but she still locks her house at night. We cannot be the hypocritical people. We have to be the adults in the room. I agree. Because other people are not the adults in the room. Remember what Stormzy was saying about something along the lines of, in his song Shut Up, these MPs, these MCs want to be Lord of the Mics, but they're not even Lord of the Yards. Like what you were saying about before, like tidy your bedroom up. It's that kind of thing. This is why I say it starts with the individual. Like, what is the state of your bedroom? Is your bed made in the morning? Why isn't it made in the morning? What are you for? Go and make the first thing you do, get out of bed and fucking make it neat as anything. Like, I make my bed, my wife's side is rubbish. I have to wait till she goes to work and I do it for her, you know what I mean? But I make it like fucking like hospital corners and shit. It's fucking, because it's like, that's how I'm starting my day. I'm starting my day as professional as I can. All right. I'm making everything neat. I'm going to fucking iron that shit. If I get, I'm getting, Uber about it, you know what I mean? And then I make her side. And funny, you look at the bedroom, my wife, our bed there, my side, neat as anything. Her side, shoes, jumpers, it's like, all the way down the bed. It's funny, right? But it's the difference between men and women, really, apart from that. But I want to be that guy that tries to sort his own life out first before even commenting on anyone else's. How can I possibly? It's very hard, isn't it? Like you, as a personal trainer, to tell someone to lose weight if you're massively overweight yourself. You know that.
Yeah,
you know that.
Absolutely.
So we just have to do that first. We have to be careful about how we're we can't just, this is the problem I have sometimes when I comment in the car on my YouTube videos. I know the more sensationalist I am, the better the videos will do, but we cannot be that irresponsible. We must be able to construct a narrative that is mature and responsible to an audience that is learning in the same way we're learning. Like your podcast right now, you've reached out to me, Tim, I want to hear about this. I'm happy to come on and help you understand things in the way that maybe I've seen it. Maybe I'm 20 years old, I can't remember, you know what it is. So so I think you're absolutely right. Don't get me wrong, but we have to be able to be the adult there, I think, if we possibly
Absolutely.
can.
I think this one thing, putting a bit of self-awareness on myself sometimes, and I've always found this when I spend too much time on social media or on X or on other platforms, and I get riled up because obviously things get reposted, things get retweeted. You see these same things coming up over and over again. It's very, very easy to get into an emotional state. And I think that's sometimes good for conveying the message, because if somebody tries to convey a message and it's very bland and they're speaking very boringly and they're monotone and this kind of thing, but they're trying to rile up the troops, I don't know. Emotion can be a good thing, but also I think, and this is something I'm often quite guilty of, is when emotion can lead us astray, and emotion can lead us down paths of, the classic example of when you're in the heat of an argument and you say something you didn't mean to and later on you regret. So I think that's where, especially with the very high emotional environment we're in at the moment, especially in Britain, with, especially the revelations that obviously people have been trying to bang the drum on this, for people have been trying to sound the alarm on what's been going on in Britain for years, for decades even. And just the absolute state of the bureaucratic corruption, that it's so easy to get into such an emotional state that you're almost feral. You're almost feral yourself in what you're saying. And I think it's a good point you made there of being, no, we must be professional. We must show that we're, willing to have open dialogue, these kinds of things. It's very easy now. You see people who are even on the more right-hand side of politics. I can't remember who it was the other day, but saying that we should stifle, or the right should stifle free speech and restrict free speech, because why on earth would you want to give your enemies the right to speak? And it's just like, well, now you're highlighting that horseshoe where the far left and the far right are not too different, from each other in a lot of things. So I think that big thing you said there about professional standards and keeping your emotions in check and keeping your room tidy, because if you keep your room tidy, oftentimes more, and this is something I've found myself, it keeps your headspace tidier as well. So it's like if you have a muddy room, you have a muddy mind, so to speak, or at least that's the way it's been in my experience anyway.
I think there's a lot of things like that, to be fair. I think when you're talking about the repression of free speech, and I think if you look at what conservatism is, or what the right would be, and I hate the definition of right and left, because people would say, well, Hitler was right wing, and I'm like, oh, it's socialism, isn't it? Technically it's left wing, but it was different. It was different back then. It's not the same as left and right now. Left and right now isn't the same as anything that's gone before it anyway. It's all muddied. It was a bit of left and a little bit of right, and a bit of totalitarianism, a bit of fascism, a bit of social, a bit of mix, you know what I mean, in what we now define it as. Now you can read some great essays, some great narratives, you can work out exactly what National Socialism was, but then you read one author, you read another, and it's all a little bit changing. So I think what is conservative? You look at right-wing conservatism, it's there's religiosity in there. There's a heavy religious bent in there, and I get that, and I like that. And what I'm seeing at the moment is I'm seeing people leaning on Christianity. And what I say to people is, don't be afraid to embrace Christianity in the lifestyle. We are a Christian nation, and people have a go at me the whole time. I'm like, we are. Our values are Christian values, whether you like it or not.
Absolutely,
we have Christian values. It doesn't mean you've got to go to church. It doesn't mean you've got to put a cross on your wall. However, if you were to read extracts of the Bible, which I do now, I visit. I'm a Catholic man, although I'm not practicing as such, but I like to embrace Christian values because I think that's a healthy way of living, forgiveness, and all these. I go and visit these monasteries, these churches around the world, and I look up and I walk in and I think that's effort. Someone has built this. Effort. They believed in something more important than themselves, and that's what they did. Look at this. Amazing. Like I talk about Buckfast Abbey down in Devon, and my family back in the 1900s, it's been built many times. They helped build Buckfast Abbey. Whenever we go down there, the monks, they give us some wine, and they're lovely people. But you walk in there and you think, this is extraordinary. Like, it's never going to be done again, is it? No one's ever going to build this again. We can't get the manpower. It's amazing. So what does it mean to be doing something for a higher purpose in yourself? And if we attach that, whether it's nationalism, which might be unhealthy, but it could be healthy. If nationalism is unhealthy, but we embrace nationalism, and it stopped foreigners raping our children, it's healthy. It's healthy. I mean, is it not? It's healthy. Yes, you can go too far. You can go full MAGA in America if you want to. But then we've got these boundaries, haven't we? And right now, we're somewhere in the middle. Maybe we need to go a bit right, and then that will overflow, and it will swing back to a bit left. It will go a bit right again. But you can, if you want to leave, if you want to go, what am I going to do? Just focus on yourself. Lead a healthy life. What does that mean? Well, it means listening to guys like yourself about fitness and nutrition. It means maybe listening to guys like myself about Christian values. It means listening to other guys, just and trying to adopt a small bit of every one of those things to be better, to be a better person within your own communities. Like, how can
Absolutely.
I help? How can I help the people? And we start small, George. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then because we don't want to jump on the. I mean, I was left when I was young, back in the day. I believe that we should tax the rich more, And now I look at it and go, well, the problem with doing so is they never reinvest that and they never grow the companies, and then we can't get jobs for young people. And all I keep saying is there's fundamentally something wrong with this country when you cannot get young people into marriages and houses and jobs. All right, whether we like marriages or not, call it relationships if you want. Personally, I still think marriage is more important than a relationship. I think there's a bond there that really, I think each person has to commit a lot and suffer and sacrifice. But houses, get people into houses, get people into jobs. And if we just cure those three things, the country grows. Right now, we can't do that. I mean, a lot of houses aren't going to British young men and women, and it makes me so sad.
And I think the more and more, and this was me in my youth. I was a hedonistic atheist in my youth. Don't get me wrong, it led me down some less than virtuous paths, should we say? But I think again, it's another Peterson quote. There's a lot of Peterson quotes coming up with this, but I can't remember what interview he said it in. But I was like, he said that he doesn't see a way back for Western civilization from like a secularist atheist standpoint. And more and more the more and more you see about what's going on, the more and more you look to what's going on, the more and more I've sort of become a lot more sympathetic to that position, and to the extent of where, after I had my experience when I was in hospital, that changed a lot of things in my outlook. But like maybe we do need to start taking at least the glue that held society together in a lot of ways, in terms of the social norms, in terms of the laws, in terms of the foundations for the laws, and the presumption of innocence till proven guilty, or all of these things, and why, and how that dates back to some of the oldest documents of like laws and these kinds of things, like the Magna Carta and things like that, and how they were influenced by Christian teachings and all of these things. And maybe we do need to start taking them a lot more seriously, and especially the one you highlighted there, which I think is, the collapse of the nuclear family and the collapse of the sacrament of marriage. I think that is, how people see relationships nowadays is a large part of what's contributing to the destruction. It's how you get people like Bonnie Blue and Lily Phillips and these kinds of things, where the actual relationship and marriage element has just been so devalued and often by a lot of people demonized and stigmatized, I think quite unfairly.
Yeah, so a technique we use in the Air Force a lot of time was the red team stuff, and to go to the extremes. So we'd say, we're going to hit a target in this airplane here. What's the target look like? What's the enemy threat look like? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we go, okay, cool. So we're going to do this plan. And we come up with a plan, lots of people in the plan, and then we red team it. And we say, right, what's wrong with this plan? And we'd all sit back, we'd bring in other people, and we get to tear our plan apart. And I think that's quite a good thing to be doing when you're looking at, especially extremes. Like, if we look at the left and right of arc of what might be good for the country, you could say, on the left of arc, let's bring as many people in as you want. It's going to increase GDP, and we're one big family. Right, let's just leave that there, park it there, and that's the left. What's the right of arc? The right of arc is we shut the borders and we get everyone that's come in the last decade and we chuck them out. Right, okay, that's pretty extreme as well. Yeah, just get the extremes. Somewhere in the middle is the correct ground. And that's what we've got to find. What is the correct ground? All right, what are we supposed to be doing? And I think these ones are interesting, especially when you start looking at things like how to live a better life, how to contribute more towards society, how are we going to get more people into marriages where that they mean something. See, the problem is my wife and I, we were divorced many, many times. If we hadn't, we would have split up. If we hadn't been married. Marriage means you've got to sacrifice something to someone that you don't particularly want to always do. There's something as well, I will tell people this because they probably don't realize it. When you're sent to war, and I've been sent to war a few times in the military, being married is a good thing because there is someone else that's going to have like your back home. It's like, I'm married. When you meet another man out there, I'm married to. It means something more than my girlfriend, my partner. I'm just telling it does. It means that you've gone and you said, I'm willing to make a commitment to you. And I think commitment, especially for men, is important. If you look at the Crusades, I've got a Richard the Lionheart flag up in my garage. I know technically he was French. He was only in England. I think he was born in England, but then never really lived in England. He lived in Normandy, didn't he? But he was one of the commanders in the third Crusade. And I think an historical figure is worth reading about. But I have the flag there. When you look at the Crusades, the knights were not wealthy people that went on these crusades. They were impoverished people that believed that by going on a crusades, they could rid themselves of sins and therefore ascend to heaven. So they went on these crusades to free Jerusalem, whatever the crusade technically would have been. Massive amounts of
Islamic
sacrifice.
colonization and all of the other problems
Absolutely.
that were going on at the time.
It reached Europe, they're pushing it back. Again, it's reached Europe, we're going to push it back again. It has no place in the Western world. And I've said this before. Islam and the West is incompatible. It has no place.
Completely
We're learning that lesson now. We're learning it now. Different values. We're going to do something about it. But we need men to stand up, like those men that went in the Crusades. And they walked literally to the Holy Land to take them back. We don't teach this in school. This is a very noble sacrifice. So what else is a noble sacrifice? Well, maybe leaning on Christian values, maybe getting married, maybe working hard for little money to put it away to get yourself on the housing ladder. Maybe, what else are we looking at? So maybe not sleeping your way around, not watching pornography and stuff. These are sacrifices because it'd be quite good to just put porn on. It's satisfying. It dulls you, of course. I don't watch it, but I understand young people do because there's so much out there. I think someone made a good point the other day. Well, people do, and I understand why. And and apparently one of the biggest Google terms is, how do I stop watching porn? Like, how do I stop watching it? And it's sad. I don't know if I was that age now, I'm not that age. I'm 51. Well, 51 this year. But young people, they can see more naked women now of high quality than any king in history could have ever said that. I think Jordan Peterson said that on the podcast I listened to recently. When you think about it, it's like the phones, isn't it? I've got more information in my pocket on this phone than any king in history I've ever had. So we need to control these things, and that comes down with an aspect of maturity and sacrifice and suffering. We're not always going to be happy. Sometimes we're going to be sad. When they used to say, like, live in the moment, it used to kind of be all zen and shit. I kind of worked out what that means now. Like, even when you are unhappy and you are down, live in the moment, appreciate what that means, because it's life, and we've only got one life. And arguably, we shouldn't be messing around with these nugatory subjects that may cure themselves in a few years anyway. But we do, because it makes life interesting. But we need to have a think about what we need to be doing as individuals. What is a good life? If you get to 80, let's just say, and you want to look back on your life. Okay, you want to look back on your life. Do you want to have worked all your life and you've got the Ferrari and the Porsche in the driveway? Or you look back in your life, you might not have these things, but it's been a wholesome and a good life and you've made a difference. Money matters when you're young for obvious reasons, and as you get old, time matters more. So we're just trading one for the other, and with that time you can do something constructive with it. And I think we need to be looking at those things, and maybe they are based in Christian values, maybe they're not.
I think that's one of the biggest lessons that was taught to me by my experience when I went into hospital, is at such a young age, being blessed in a way with that outlook of nearly having my life cut so short that even while I'm young, I realize how much time matters. And I think it's one of the biggest things there is, like, time does matter, because at the end of the day, we have finite lives. So every minute of it counts, and almost in a lot of ways, that's what gives life meaning. But yeah, there was loads of good stuff there, has to be said. And I do think that at least remembering where our traditions, norms, rules, regulations, where they come from and why, is going to be at least a very important part of getting the country, or even getting everybody. If everybody on an individual level takes that, and as you said, does the things that make their life better, and by extension, by them benefiting their lives, living better lives, being healthier, being stronger, being better for the communities, it's going to have that positive knock-on effect at a community level. It's going to have a positive knock-on effect at a societal level, and that's going to have potentially positive knock-on effects at a civilizational level, at a national level. So it all comes down to people, cleaning their room, so to speak, and being willing to take accountability for what they do and for their lives, and making sure that they live the best lives and the healthiest lives and the most prosperous lives, and obviously making sure that you do the best with the hand that you've been dealt.
I think it does. And also, I hate to say it, but if you can try and stay out of as much debt as you want, the problem is we get people into debt in this country, and we keep them in work to pay off that debt. And that means we're a prison of the state, because we can't say what we want, especially under this kind of government, we can't stay if we want. Because if you stay if you want, you might lose your job. If you lose your job, you can't pay your mortgage. All of a sudden you default, and then you haven't got a house anymore. So a lot of people aren't willing to speak up, understandably so. I don't criticise people for this, especially with a young family. I understand it. I get that you want to speak out on Twitter, but sometimes I argue with someone on Twitter. I'm like, Donkey Boy 44, mate, what skin in the game have you got here? You can say what you want, mate. You can be all critical of Israel. You can say all this stuff about, we must destroy whatever it is. Fine. I can't say it. Well, I can say it, and I do say it, but I take what my actions have consequence because my name is up there on Twitter. You know what I mean? So we have to be a bit careful about, what we're doing with life. Is it better to live in maybe, just a bit more freedom, maybe a job where you've got a side gig as well. So if you do lose your main job because you do speak out, even if it's at something like a PTA, like a Parent Teachers Association meeting, and someone says something about you and then a rumor starts and then you lose your job, have you got something else that can sort of just support the family? Have you got this is why marriage is good, because if you both of you are working, one of you loses your job, the other one's still working. You're not like straight away, you can then rebuild. Happened to me. I lost a job and left the military. Wife was still working. I owe my wife quite a lot for that, really, because that made her quite unhappy for quite a long period of time. Because, I lost a job because of something that wasn't, I said I had a YouTube channel that was saying stuff, and I never deleted a single thing ever. But the company I was working for, the Ministry of Defence took my security clearance away. I got it back because I threatened legal action against them. I got it back within about 6 months, but the job had gone, and I don't want it anyway. I don't need a security clearance anyway. It's not the point. But the truth was they were using that coercive behaviour. They were saying, well, we're just going to pause your clearance because of what you said to make me not say stuff. So we just have to be careful about how much debt we take on initially. Just try and maintain those freedoms, because I think it's a responsibility. And I will say Englishmen, because we are, I think when you compare ourselves to the Welsh or Scottish population or Irish population, we're overwhelmingly English, aren't we, in the UK? So I tend to use the term English, but don't hate me if you're Welsh and Scottish.
Yes, I would imagine so.
But if you're Welsh and Scottish, I just don't want to say British, because it includes a lot of people I don't think should be British. It's an export derivative, isn't it, of the Irish, the Scottish, the English, and the Welsh. We call it British around the world. Hang on, we're all independent countries. We just come under a single union, but we are still independent countries. We still are England, Scotland, Wales. You know what I mean? So around the world,
Six Nations brings that out better than anything else.
I think it does, most definitely. And I'll tell you why, because I tend to support Wales a lot of the time as well. Because my father was a Welshman from the valleys, from Gleneath, in fact, Gleneath, the town of Gleneath.
Oh, that's only 40 minutes down the road.
Yeah, I used to go drink in the bars down. That's some hard rugby down there back in the day, I'll tell you right now. And I used to go with my dad, used to go and drink in all the bars down there and stuff, the sawdust on the floor and stuff. But there was some good rugby down there. I was in Rome once, and I met the entire Welsh team in a lift in a hotel in Rome when I was in the military. And they'd just been out to one of the massive lads, didn't they? And they're all speaking Welsh. And a lot of them didn't, a lot of them didn't speak English. They spoke Welsh because they were that deep in the valleys. And so they'd been to a dinner they didn't want to go to, of course. I think they just played Italy or something. And so I was trying to converse with them, but I didn't speak Welsh. And of course, a lot of them didn't speak English that well. So it was quite interesting, actually. But no, I just think, I think you're right. We are separate with our nations. And it's very difficult sometimes. The Union flag is a flag of many people unified. I understand that. But the unification, unfortunately, now includes people that were born in this country that should never be here in the first place, with different values to us.
Yeah, I'll mute that a minute.
That's all right. So they were born with different values to us, and that's why I tend to use, English or Scottish or Welsh. Or it doesn't, we're next door neighbours and we do look after each other. But I just think we've got to be careful of being that inclusive of people that shouldn't be in the country anyway, and they shouldn't be in the country because of their values. And if their values, not the whole, say, Pakistani community, let's use those. If their values, and here's the thing, of raping young English schoolgirls, let's just say, I know Wales had a bit of an issue as well with this, and I think Scotland did as well, but if that's their values, and the values of the rest of the community is not to call it out and not to march. I didn't see Pakistani Muslim women walking through London talking about how disgraceful it was. I tell you what I did see, because it was reported in the paper, of them cheering their husbands on and their fathers on as they got sent down to jail. I read that in the paper. That happened. The Pakistani Muslim community did that, some of them, fair enough. But where's the disgust in the whole community? I see a few people putting their hands up. I see a few people, Ben Habib and some other people saying this is disgraceful. I don't see many others. And so when we talk about Britain, Great Britain, when we talk about British people, these people will be under that banner. And I don't want them to be under the banner. I don't want to be under the same banner as Englishmen who fought to make this country what it is. And we've got people in here that should never be here. Now, that might be a nationalist argument, but is it safer that we don't have any of them in here? And that's what it comes down to, George. Like, what's the safest thing to do for your kids it would be safer to get rid of every single Pakistani Muslim from the country than it would be to have any of them in. That would be the safest thing. Now, let's be honest, that's obviously not practical. It's not something we're doing. We're very accepting people. So we're not doing that. No one's advocating that. But when we talk about the red teaming and when we talk about the left and right of arc and the boundaries, those conversations need to be had. And the conversation we could have is maybe we need to pause immigration for a bit until we've worked out just how many of these people we're bringing in. And we don't know who they are. They don't have any records. And the truth is, though, George, as we all know, we can't pause immigration. We can't do it because the European Court of Human Rights legislation won't allow us to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the, I was looking up, just having a look at some of the political parties, what their policies were and all stuff like that. And that was actually one of the policies of UKIP, was actually to freeze immigration for 5 years. And they were actually saying in their manifesto that they're going to do work to negate the effects of, or negate the, what's the word I'm looking for? Grip that the ECHR and all of these foreign courts have on the UK. So be interested to see what the 2029 sort of political landscape looks like in the UK, especially after, I certainly think we're going to have a reality check from 2024 to 2028 with being shown what it's like out in America in the Trump-Vance presidency. I certainly think that's going to, shine a lot of light, almost like to a lot of people in the UK, of what it's like and what it could be. I think is what it's going to be like. But yeah, in that regard, the next 5 years, the next 4 to 5 years, is going to be very, very interesting indeed. And it is exactly like what you said. I'm aware that the time is running out, and I'm aware you said you could push it, but I don't want to push it for too long.
That's
I
right.
appreciate that
That's
you've
right.
sat down for me for this
That's
long.
right.
This has been a tremendous conversation.
That's okay.
But there was a story which came out, or court documents, I believe, came out the other day, and it was a young girl who was 15 at the time, and she was put, I believe, into this arranged marriage situation where she had adopted a Muslim name. She had been decided to dress up in full Muslim garb, and she was married in this ceremony or something which I believe is called a nikah, Nikah. And it's a wedding ceremony where she got married to this Muslim man, or I'm not sure where the guy was from. They like to use the euphemism Asian, don't they, in these documents and in the media. They like to use the euphemism Asian to sort of cover it up a little bit. But she was 15 at the time, and, she was taken into this family. Her social workers went to the ceremony, this wedding ceremony, and AOK'd it. All the agencies that were involved AOK'd it. This, in my opinion, something that's truly disgusting. And a ceremony that she didn't even have to attend. There was just two witnesses that had to attend. But even after all this, it was revealed that the person she got married to was her abuser, and she was being abused by his family also. And then it brings you back to the whole thing where there are problems within a certain sect of this community, whereby not only people are doing these heinous things, and by no means it's just like a race issue or anything like that. It's more of like in my opinion, a religious cultural issue, from where these people are coming from and how they see, people within our nation, or within the nations of Great Britain, or in the nations of the UK, all of our different nations, but how they cover for each other, how they, as you said, they don't come out and say these things. They don't come out. There may be a couple of people that come out and condemn their communities and all of these things, but they have more loyalty to people within their community than to the overall, base of the country or base of their community. And
exactly.
It's almost like you can't have a cohesive society with cultures within it that are so diametrically opposite each other. It's that when they say that diversity is our strength, but I'm like, okay, but diversity of what? I don't think you can have a diversity of culture, because you can't have a cohesive culture if the culture is diverse in a way that it's completely incompatible and diametrically opposite each other. I don't think.
Well, this is what I mean. Diversity is not our strength. It never has been our strength. Now, cognitive diversity. But if we start looking at IQ levels of the people that we're bringing in, arguably, you're not going to find that. You're not going to find it at all. And I'm also saying there are elements of the British population, the ethnic British population, that you're going to find with low IQ levels, most definitely. So when we talk about diversity being our strength, why? Because that person's, this is what I was saying to the Air Force. Why? When they started bringing in minority ethnics and women over white men, I said to them, why are you doing that? They were like, diversity. What? So you're telling me then that women and minorities, what diversity? They're better than what? Why do we need them in? Because what you're telling me is that you need them in because of their skin color. That's why you want black kids and you want women in because of their gender and their skin color. How's that going to help anything if they're cognitively? And this is where the Air Force got themselves stuck, and where everyone gets themselves stuck. It's like they say, well, no, because they're different, aren't they? How are they different? They have to tell you eventually that they believe black kids think differently to white kids, and therefore they're racist. And that's how you get them. So what? You want to bring black kids in? Why? Because they think differently, Tim. Really? So now you're racist. So now your racist policies are going to saturate the Air Force with people who think differently to your core demographic. I've flown with black people before. They think exactly the same as me. They kill people in exactly the same way, and they would die exactly the same way. There's no difference. One of my friends was a black guy, lovely bloke in the Navy, flew helicopters actually, had more of an English accent than I ever had. He went to Cambridge University, if you're crying out loud. I mean, if anyone, it was me that was low intellect in comparison to this guy. But the problem is that the left are inherently racist, and in order to cover up, they go over the top, and we must flood the world with black kids. We must flood the world with women. There's no reason. You mentioned the LAPD or the LA Fire Department, didn't you? With that, exactly the same thing. Let's flood women in. Why? Diversity. No. Don't ever say that word again. Why? Why put a woman in there? They struggle. Because it will be good. Because no, give me the reasons why it's good. Why not put a man in there? Why not put tests on both of them, by the way, on whatever the metrics are to make a great firefighter, and just see who the best person is, because that's called merit. And the problem is the Equality Act 2010, people don't understand it. They've never read it. What it actually says is if you've got two people, and you've got a law firm of 10 men, let's say, and two people apply for a job. One's a man, one's a woman, and they are pretty much exactly the same on everything, which it even says in the Equality Act, that's probably never going to happen. It's really rare that this does. It says that. You can then say, well, look, you're both really, really equal. We'll take the woman because, it helps diversify our law firm. You can do that. And that's called positive discrimination. Discrimination, not positive action. Am I right in this now? I've got the wrong around now. No, positive action.
Yeah, I think it's just between affirmative action, positive discrimination, yes.
So that's called positive action, where you could argue it's discrimination, but that's called positive action. However, what the Air Force did, it did it with like 300 men, which is absolutely ludicrous, and it's just pure racism, because there was no way of proving. You've got to make these two people almost identical before you can then choose the one that is underrepresented within your workforce. And the Air Force never did that. And that's the problem. The left never do that. The left just say, wouldn't it be good if? And that's the issue. It's a naivety. It's a low intellect naivety. It's a low intellect, a racist, just assumption that it's good. And the reason they think it's good, George, is because it hides their own racial biases. We're all racially biased, but the left want to own, as opposed to saying, you know what? If we flood this country with minorities, what does it do to like the ethnic makeup of the UK? And how cohesive are we going to be in the future? They don't want to have that conversation. They want to say it'll be good. Why? Because there's more black people here. Why? Because there's more Muslims here. Why? Because there's more Jews here. Why? Because there's more Sikhs here, more Hindus. Why? Why is it good? You're not telling me why it's good. You're just saying it is good. That's not an argument. My sister uses that argument. It's a circular argument. It is good. Why? Well, you racist, Tim. No, stop all this nonsense. Let's get that. This is what we need to do, George. As men, we take control. I say men because women are more agreeable than men, and men are not agreeable, as I think I'm hopefully demonstrating here. We need to kind of say, look, I'll risk now on my own YouTube channel being taken down, demonetized. You do whatever you want. But I just want to put that argument out there. Why? Give me the reason. They never can. They never can. And that's the problem. That's why we know it's wrong, because the arguments are shallow. They are veneer. They're surface thin.
Just almost like they're repeating programmed answers.
To make them feel good. They can't think for themselves. It's just too hard. My sister's like this sometimes. If you ask the question why 5 times and it can't be answered by the 5th one, there isn't a reason. You haven't got a good enough reason. You just want people to come into the country because it makes you feel virtuous. It makes you feel good. How about we don't feel good? How about we feel bad, but we preserve the ability for our children to get on the housing ladder? How about we preserve the ability for our children not to get racially abused in the playground, to actually get decent jobs, to actually get married, to have families and grow up and do good things for the country? How about we take that risk, which we should be taking because we're Englishmen or Scotsmen or Welshmen or Northern Irish, but we are people who have got an ancestral background that we should be proud of. And what we try and do, what the country does and what the government does, is try and diminish that. Like Sadiq Khan in London, they tried to diminish it, saying, no, we're not that good. And that's why I think they're going back to the beginning of the argument, why they're bringing out these young porn actresses, is to go, look, these Pakistanis, it wasn't their fault because, it's degenerate of the white society. So, great conversation. I appreciate coming on here, and hopefully, I do enjoy what you're saying, George, to be fair. And I wish you all the best.
Sir. just as we're signing off, do you want to tell people where they can find you and where they can find your services if they are interested, your social medias, your YouTube, everything like that, and we'll call it there. I really appreciate this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's all right. We discussed it already. It's YouTube. It's Fast Jet Performance. And I've got fastjetperformance.com, wrote some essays, one's in the military, and Shadowlands. Well, go through Fast Jet Performance. Find me on Twitter, Tim Davies _UK if you want to. I'm not a massive Twitter fan because I just put out, bang, what I think, and then it causes a massive storm, and I just, it's too much, isn't it? So, yeah. If you want to find me, ask George where to find me. You'll be able to find me. No worries. Support your podcast. All right.
Very well. Thank you very much, Tim. And
no worries.
Yeah, hopefully we'll speak to you again. Or hopefully I'm back sometime soon or sometime in the future. I certainly hope so. But thank you have a very good day, and we'll hopefully catch up very soon.
Thanks, George.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
And there you have it. My conversation with Mr. Tim Davies. Thank you very much, Tim, for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed and took away from it as much as I did, guys. If you want to find Tim, you can find him at Fast Jet Performance on YouTube and on his website. If you want to find him on X, you can find him at Tim Davies _UK. And with that, have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Godspeed.